The movie Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen was filmed right here at the Stephen F. Udvar-Hazy Center in Chantilly, Virginia.
This aircraft set a speed record by traveling from LA to DC in 1 hour and 4 minutes.
And in the movie, the SR-71 Blackbird is discovered to be a Decepticon.
It's a Decepticon!
Decepticon!
He transforms right here in the museum, going from the fastest turbojet ever into a giant robot.
As he transforms, he begins to walk around and knocks into several of the aircraft hanging from the ceiling.
Show yourselves!
As you can see, these aircraft are just fine. We didn't actually let the producers move the planes around while filming the movie.
They used one of the tricks of the movie-making trade, CGI, or computer-generated imagery, to knock him around. He goes up to these doors and he knocks them down,
He's worthless.
revealing an airplane graveyard behind the museum.
This is another movie trick, making the viewer think that they're at another location.
That graveyard is a real place, but it's at an Air Force base in Arizona.
So here's the behind-the-scenes look. As you can see, there's no airplane graveyard here. It's just a flat space, which lets us transport aircraft in and out of the museum.
Today we are looking at air and space in the movies. Here's our ride.
We're going to take a look at how movies are made, from writing scripts to special effects.
And we're going to see if you can figure out some of the movie magic we used in creating today's episode.
This is STEM in 30.
You ready?
Yep.
Roll out! Hey Beth, you want to go catch a movie?
We have a show to do.
The show is about movies. This is what we call research.
Okay, sounds good. Throughout today's episode, we're going to show you how movies are made, and we're going to give you some hints about how this episode was made.
You might notice some numbers in the corner of the screen. See if you can figure out what those are. We'll reveal the answer later in the episode. While we head to the movies and hopefully see a really great story, let's learn more from author and storyteller Andy Weir.
Andy Weir wrote The Martian, which was later turned into a movie of the same name.
Hi, I'm Andy Weir, author of The Martian. What are the important parts of a good story? Oh boy, for the sorts of fiction that I write, the most important thing is you need to have a likable protagonist. The reader has to really be rooting for, empathizing with, or even putting themselves into the place of the protagonist.
I'm definitely gonna die up here if I have to listen to any more god-awful disco music.
Number two is it has to pull the reader along. You have to make the reader want to read the next page. I want to keep my readers up all night. I want them to be the sort of person who usually goes to bed at 10 p.m., but they're up until 2 a.m. reading because they just could not put the book down. And in the end, of course, you need to have a satisfying ending. The story needs to end in a way that makes them happy or makes them feel like, yes, that's appropriate. Because once they're done with the book, it's going to stay with them for a little while if you did your job right. If you don't make the ending good, it's going to sour their whole experience. The main characters in any given story are ones that I'm invested in and I like, because if they aren't, why am I writing this story? If I don't like them, I should analyze why I don't like them. If I don't like them because they're boring or it's a chore to read or whatever, then that's something I should address. If I don't like them because they make me mad because of the actions they're taking in the story, then that's good because that engages the reader. And the reader's like, oh, I hate that guy. That's good. I consider my biggest weakness as a writer to be characters. My main character in my books will often have some amount of depth. The secondary characters will often be fairly flat. And so if there's a character I don't like, they just won't get that much screen time. If there's somebody who's important and critical, but really they're just there to exposition one thing, then they have their moment in the sun and then they're gone. I've been trying to get better at that. I'm always working on that. I want to get better. If you want to be a writer, I have 3 bits of advice for you. First off, you have to actually write. Daydreaming about what your story is going to be like and how cool it's going to be and thinking about one scene or another in your head is not writing. That's daydreaming. It's important, but you need to have words going onto the document in order for you to write. Number 2, this is hard, resist the urge to tell your story to your friends and family. Most writers are driven by a desire to have an audience. They want other people to experience the story that they have come up with. If you tell people the story verbally, it takes care of that need and it gets rid of your desire to actually write it. Now you can give it to them a chunk at a time. You don't have to write a whole book before you show it to a friend of yours, but you could write a chapter and say, hey, what do you think of this? Read it, tell me what you think. And then finally, once you've finished your book, there has never been a better time in human history to self-publish. If you want to write a book, and the worst that happens is you spent a lot of time working on something that people didn't like. You have to write a lot before you start writing stuff that is good.
CGI has come a long way and has made the impossible possible in movies.
Before CGI was more heavily used, there was a lot of use of practical effects. In the original Batman television show, Batman and Robin climbed up walls. Computers were not used for this effect. Instead, this was done by simply turning the camera on its side to make it look like they were climbing up a wall.
Buster Keaton was the king of practical effects, doing his own stunts and being creative about how things were filmed. Let's learn more about special effects from the chair of the Space History Department and pop culture expert, Margaret Weitekamp.
Hi, I'm Margaret Weitekamp. I'm the chair of the Space History Department here at the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum. This is the Close Encounters mothership model. This is the large model that was used to get the iconic shots from Steven Spielberg's 1977 film, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Steven Spielberg, the director, he saw a petroleum plant lit up at night and was really captured by that vision of all of those lights in amongst all of those other industrial-looking structures. The bottom, as I understand it, comes from him seeing the city lights in California reflected in the hood of his car. Part of the layers of detail that are on this model are something that are called greeblies, which is where you just put a lot of texture on a thing in order to make it look like a real thing. So if you look at your car, if you look at your bicycle, it has bumps, it has ridges, it has things on it that are a part of it being a real thing with parts and pieces and connections. So the way that a model like this is built is that it is hand-built of all of these little tiny pieces. The little columns on the top of the model were actually hand-rolled by the model makers. But we also know that they just grabbed streetlights from railroad kits and bent them at alien kind of angles and used those to create the spires and the spines that are all around this model. And then the cloud effects that surrounded the model. That was a part of the story in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, that when the alien ships would show up, it would affect actually an almost change in the weather and create clouds that would be around the ships themselves. By creating layers of density with water, they were able to create this look of having paint seem to billow, but then also hit a stopping point and spread out in a way that made it seem, when it was added to the film from the model, like the model itself, the ship itself, was reshaping how the clouds formed around it. As the mothership comes over Devil's Tower National Monument, that large butte out in the American West in South Dakota, all of those pieces needed to be built in order to make this scene. So there's not only the building of the mothership model to depict the alien spaceship, but they also needed to build Devil's Tower and then composite that in with the rest of what was being done to set the scene. The model makers thought that nobody was ever going to see this up close. So in addition to doing all of the very exacting, detail-oriented work of building all of the layers that are what gives this model its final effect on film, they had some fun. So the model makers hid little things in amongst the other details. Here you can even see R2-D2 essentially riding on the edge of the mothership model. Shows up upside down in the actual film. And in fact, there are even two very small, deep inside the model, great white sharks. little nod to Jaws, which was Steven Spielberg's movie just previous to this. Movie making really builds on itself. When people see things done by another filmmaker, they are trying not only to replicate that, perhaps adopt some of those technologies, but then also build on it. So when you really look into the history of movie making, there's a complex history in the development of cameras, in the development of lights, of special effects. And starting in the 1990s, you then add to that computer-generated imaging and the ability to grab something and alter it, or in fact to draw whole characters with a computer.
Margaret mentioned that the cloud effects were filmed using 2 different water densities. The movie makers used fresh water and salt water. The salt water is more dense and stays at the bottom of the container. The fresh water stays on top of the salt water. Then they poured the paint in, which also is less dense than the salt water. The effect turned out stunning. We even tried it ourselves, and it was really cool. You could see the paint go down toward the salt water and then stop and bubble around in the fresh water.
This effect was totally possible because of the difference in densities. This is something you can try at home.
Hi, I'm Sadie, and I have an experiment I want you to try with me. We are going to test the density of different objects to explore what happens when you put fluids and objects together with different densities. You are going to need a few simple things from around your house: a tall, clear glass or jar, corn syrup, water, vegetable oil, food coloring, hard candy, small paperclip, small stone, and a penny. Start by pouring the liquids into the jar in this order: corn syrup, colored water, and vegetable oil. If you don't have one of these liquids, that's okay. You can still do the activity with the liquids that you have. Each of the liquids has a different density. Instead of mixing, the oil floats on top of the water. That means for the same volume, oil has less mass than the water. What does that mean about corn syrup? Next, drop the different items you found into the jar. I'm gonna drop a penny in. Watch what happens. Did it go straight to the bottom? What happens to the other things you drop in? Complete the activity and come back when you are done. When you drop things in, what does their final position tell you about their density? What properties do these items have that either make them sink all the way to the bottom, part way to the bottom, or float on the top? Are there any other liquids you could think of that might have different densities? What else can you think of?
Props and costumes are a vital part of movie making.
What the characters wear and what they use are really important to help tell the story.
Seeing an action star wearing floppy shoes and a top hat might not give you the same impression as a superhero costume.
We're going to head over to another Smithsonian museum and check out some amazing props and costumes.
We are at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History, and we're getting ready to take a look at their amazing gallery, Entertainment Nation.
We're going to look at some props that all have connections to flight. Let's go.
Here, you will find objects from all across entertainment and pop culture. You can see the ruby slippers worn by Judy Garland in The Wizard of Oz, wave at R2-D2 and C-3PO from Star Wars, and rock out with a guitar from music legend Prince. You can also get up close and personal with costumes from theater and television shows, view sports memorabilia from the GOATs Michael Jordan and Muhammad Ali, try and get your direction straight with a sign from MASH, and stroll on down to Sesame Street and see some Muppets.
Hi, Marty and Beth.
Hi,
Welcome
Ryan.
to Entertainment Nation.
Hi, this is Ryan Lintelman. He is an expert and the curator for American Entertainment. Thanks for having us today.
Absolutely, yeah.
Can you show us some props?
Yeah. Well, here, we're in front of Captain America's shield, so let's start with that.
Cool.
Is this made of vibranium?
No, sadly. Because, if it was, somebody would have broken in here already to, taken it and used it to take over the world. But this is a prop that was made for the film Captain America: The Winter Soldier. So it's actually made of polyurethane, which is just a flexible rubber-like plastic material.
And is this the only shield that they used?
No, there were many different shields that would have been made for the production. So, when you're making a film, you really want to think about the types of things that you want to do with a movie prop. And so there would have been a version that was made of metal, like probably aluminum, that was very shiny and well made for the close-up shots where you really want to see what the shield looks like. There would have been a version made of fiberglass maybe for when you're like running around and you need to throw the shield. And then there's a version like this that's made of a flexible material for stunt sequences. So if you're actually fighting with it and there's a possibility that somebody's going to be hit, even if they're a stunt person, who's working on the film, you want to be sure that they're not going to get hurt. So you wouldn't want to make it out of a metal, whether it's vibranium or aluminum, something that's a little bit, a little easier and softer. And then there's also the computer-generated version that would be used a lot of times in the film as well.
What kind of story are you trying to tell with this shield?
Well, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is one of the most popular movie series of all time, and Captain America is sort of one of the most popular superheroes of all time as well. And he really represents American values. So in this gallery, we're exploring how entertainment helps us to think about big issues. We wanted to look at what are the ideas of patriotism that Captain America communicates, and what are the issues that we look at today that the films help us to understand. So issues about sort of like terrorism and big issues that face society. How do you maintain civil liberties and some of the values that we hold dear as Americans, despite all these challenges that are facing us? So Captain America is kind of an exemplar of how you withhold those values and make sure that you're standing up for them even as you face those big terrorist issues.
Why are props so important to movies?
Props communicate so much about the characters. They're sometimes, the thing that drives the action. There's a term called a MacGuffin, that means the prop that everybody's, striving for throughout a film. Think of the Maltese Falcon or Thanos' Infinity Gauntlet in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But I think that they're a representation of values sometimes, like with this that has all of the symbols of the American flag on it, but also, can be so important to the action of a film, right? So everybody's trying to get something, or it's a weapon that's used to fight. So props are really the sort of central communicator of so much of the film's plot and meaning. Well, guys, this is a great prop, but I've got a lot of other cool things to show you. You want to go check them out?
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
All right, let's go. Well, guys, thank you for joining us here in the Batcave. Actually, this is one of our storage rooms here at the museum, and I pulled out some of the costumes and props from film that I thought you might want to see. So we have here a Superman costume worn by Christopher Reeve in the movie Superman 4. This is a cowl, which is sort of the mask that's worn by Batman. This was worn by George Clooney in the film Batman and Robin. And then this is a batarang that was used in the film Batman Forever.
That is awesome. Now, we were looking at some other costumes from the stage, and they're very differently made. Can you tell us about this costume as compared to stage costumes?
Yeah. So when you have a stage production, you're making these custom costumes that are worn by actors every night for a long period of time. They have to be on stage for a little while, but then you take them off and change into something different. It makes a lot of sense to make them, very well made, quality materials, so that you can continue to use them over and over again. Whereas when you're making a film, time is what's really important. You want to make sure that you've got a lot of costumes, a lot of different types of costumes that all look the same but are made for different purposes that you can change out of quickly, and if one of them gets torn or dirty or something like that, you can just throw it away and move on to the next one. So they don't put as much work and thought into making movie costumes, especially at this period in movie history when a film like Superman 4 was kind of a lower budget production and something that was a sequel to a sequel to a sequel. And so this costume is not as well made as a lot of others that you see, even costumes today made for films, but certainly, compared to a theatrical costume, it's sort of poor quality.
And this wasn't the only Superman suit that he wore in the movie, right?
No, and that's another interesting point. So you can see on the tag here that it actually says Christopher Reeve walking. And so this costume was made for scenes where Superman was walking. And it seems really silly, but it was important to have a costume made for scenes where he's flying or scenes where he's fighting that might be from different materials, different sheens, different quality even. And so, you want to have costumes that fit the purpose of that moment. And so another reason why these costumes are made kind of cheaply, quickly, and there are many different costumes made.
Now, the materials to make Batman Cal are very different from
Yes.
Superman.
Yeah. So, at this period in movie history, you see a lot of these sort of like sculpted bodysuits that are made. So this is made of a plastic material that can be sort of sculpted to show the musculature of the character. And it was difficult because in earlier iterations of Batman, like the series that was made for television in the 1960s, he looks kind of schlubby compared to later on when he's got this really sculpted muscular bodysuit. And so that's an innovation that happens in movie history at this period in time. This is sort of the last moment where movies are for the most part made with practical effects and costumes carrying a lot of that content rather than CGI sort of taking over and becoming the way that modern superhero movies, a lot of, sometimes a character's entire costume is just CGI. And so, this is this last moment of the costume being the thing.
Now, when you talk about doing research into this collection, that means watching movies, right?
It sometimes means watching movies. So if you love watching movies, become an entertainment curator.
Awesome.
But also it means connecting with scholars, with collectors, with the people who are involved in the production of a film, and asking them those questions. How did you think about solving this problem? When you needed to make a bodysuit that looked muscular but was also really flexible and you could move in, how did you come about, with solving that through materials, through the science behind how things work, and making things look good on screen. Even if we look at it later and it looks kind of silly and poorly made now, it looked good on screen. And so a lot of that has to do with the lighting, with the cameras that were used at the time, with the way that you set up the scene. So the people who make movies are experts at those kinds of questions about, how well do we have to make this costume just so that it looks good for when we're producing the film, and nobody's going to look at the bottom of the shoes and see that they have electrical tape on it.
How are all of these different props connected?
Well, movies are about kind of illustrating our dreams and desires and our values. And so one of the things that I think from the earliest movies to today, people have always wanted to demonstrate flight. And so, a movie like Superman, which was very innovative for its time in terms of how it depicted, special effects and the costumes and everything that went into creating the magic of the film, they did a lot of work to make sure that the flying sequences seemed really real, even though that's something that nobody's ever done, is, put their arm up in the air and started to fly. Trying to create that aura of realism helps you get lost in the illusion of the film and really enjoy it. And so, over time, the way that costumes develop, the way that the technology behind movies develops is always to kind of draw you in and to the illusion and make you feel like you're a part of it. And so there's always a striving for realism, a striving for, making things look authentic on film, and the costumes and technology behind it all help to achieve those effects.
We've looked at some amazing props. What about music? Is it used to help tell these stories as well?
Oh yeah, music is so important to film. It really carries a lot of the emotional meaning of the film. It helps to guide audiences to how they should be feeling about something. So you can imagine in a scene where Superman takes flight, you have really stirring, majestic music, kind of imagining what it would feel like to be soaring out over the city. Or in a scene where there's something scary happening, music can really help set a mood and create suspense and, get you ready for that jump scare where something comes out and, or even to communicate something about a particular character, right? So the first time you see Darth Vader in the Star Wars series, he's a bad guy because you hear that music that's so ominous and evil. So there's so much that is part of the craft of movie making in imbuing music into a scene and helping that to carry some of the meaning.
It's not just music that helps to create a mood. There's also certain sounds that really trigger emotions. Can you tell us a little bit about how that's used as well?
Yeah, and sound is so important to film. There's an entire industry that's built up around creating sounds. So the sounds that you hear when you watch a film are not necessarily what was happening when the film was being created. You can imagine, if there are dogs barking in the background when you're creating some soundscape or something, afterward you come in and create the sounds that are going to be in the movie. So there are people called Foley artists that use a lot of materials around the house or things that they've created to create the sounds that you want to hear. So they're really good at figuring out, for instance, like what does it sound like to be punched? You might not know if you're ever punched, what that sounds like because you're trying to recover from being punched. But somebody who's watching a movie where somebody gets punched, you have an idea of what that sound should sound like. And so Foley artists create that. There's a lot of other work that they do too, for instance, like creaking floors or opening a door, that when you're recording the sound as we have microphones on right now, when you're filming something, you might not be getting the sound as loud as you want or exactly sounding like you want. So afterward, that sound is created. And so that really is so important to a film. Again, kind of creating that illusion and the mood and putting you in the place where that film is happening.
Ryan, thank you for showing us this awesome stuff.
No problem. I'm so glad I could have you guys in.
This has been great.
All right, well, I got to go do some more research, so I'm going to leave you guys here.
Sounds good. Beth and I actually got a chance to film our own short movie. Watch it and think about the music and how it adds to the mood.
Marty? Are you in here? Why is it so dark? Ah! Now, take a look at the same video, but with different music. Marty? Are you in here? Why is it so dark? Ah!
Music and sound definitely make a difference to how you experience a movie. Think about your favorite movie and what would happen if you changed that soundtrack.
Movies would not come together if we didn't have people who put them together. We are lucky to have some amazing editors. They take the video footage we film and put it all together so it tells a story. That starts with us brainstorming on an episode.
This is where we do most of our brainstorming. It starts with sticky notes and ideas.
We are constantly rearranging the pieces of the show to make sure we are telling a good story.
For example, it wouldn't make sense to talk about editing before we learned about props, music, and special effects.
Once the editing starts, we will still move things around. This is called non-linear editing, where things that are filmed out of order are put into the order that we want them.
That's how most movies are made. Rarely are things filmed in the order we see when we watch the final product.
Remember those numbers in the corner of the screen? Those represent the order we filmed this episode in.
You will notice that the first scene was not the first thing we filmed. Take a second now to rewind and check those out.
Welcome back. Let's dive a little bit more into non-linear editing.
We're going to show you a professional program. It has a lot of bells and whistles that you may not have access to, but don't worry. The skills we're going to show you transfer to any program that allows non-linear editing.
And some of those programs are free, and we'll list them in our teacher tips.
Hi, I'm Nick Evans, and I'm one of the video editors here at STEM in 30. There are quite a few different editors who put the show together. As you can see, there are a lot of video clips, motion graphics, and audio bits in the timeline. The timeline is where pieces of video, audio, and their ancillary stuff go. Here, in the master timeline, is where we put finished videos. This package, that's what we call a completed piece of video of Andy Weir, was given to me complete. I dropped it into the timeline, and it was actually the first thing filmed for this episode. It was filmed 10 months before this episode came out. Next, let's take a look at a piece I'm currently putting together. I love the Transformers, and working on the opening to the show was really exciting. I took a few short clips of the movie and worked them around what Marty and Beth filmed. Marty and Beth are really good, but
don't worry.
Just don't worry. While we head to the movie,
sometimes they make mistakes. I cut those out. I take the best pieces and put them together in the right order. I also add B-roll. Those are pictures or video that help tell the story that they want to tell. In this case, it's video from the movie Transformers and some cool shots of the museum. In the scenes with Bumblebee, those were all filmed on a closed road behind the museum and in the museum's parking lot. But we made it look like Marty and Beth are zooming off to other places.
figure out some of the movie magic we used in creating today's episode.
This is STEM in 30.
You ready?
Yep.
Roll out!
Also, when you see the car first pull up, we made it look like the car was driving itself. It wasn't. One of our producers pulled it forward. I also added music and sound effects. If you watch the comics episode, I did the audio editing for that, and I actually made the sound effects of the alien. While it was a little hard on the voice, it really helped tell the story of an alien attacking our heroes. No matter what program you use to edit, you will want to keep in mind that you can always move things around. Good audio and good music can take a mediocre video and make it good. Having great music and great audio can make a good video great. And no matter what, it is always important that you tell a story that is more than meets the eye.
We're about out of time. The good guys won and the credits are about to roll.
If you want to try and make some movies with your own students, be sure to check out our teacher tips.
And if you like this video, be sure to follow us on social media and subscribe to the National Air and Space Museum's YouTube channel.
See you at the movies!